The other day I saw that little public information thing put out by the EU. These EU people are just scoundrels. Anyway, they put out this little public service thing that you're supposed to have 72 hours, 3 days worth of supplies on hand. Well, that's just a ridiculously small amount. Uh, you know, you really aren't even going to be able to comprehend what's going on in 3 days. Thinking that you could have something, 3 days and then, yep, everything's fine again. And, these emergency services, especially in those countries in Europe, they aren't going to be able to, in any way, contain something in 3 days. That's just ridiculous to think that way. They're always worried about, oh, you got to have your phone charged up. And if something really goes down, that phone ain't going to do you a damn bit of good. It's a foolish thing to think that way. I'm not really into this prepper thing. That you are to a certain extent just because of where I live. Like you're prepared in winter, you could be snowed in for a month. No big deal. Even in spring with flooding, it could happen for a long period of time. So you just normally keep stuff on hand. Now I can see in European cities they have a tendency of shopping for the day. And we don't do that here, or most people don't. But yeah, you have to have stuff on hand. It's just foolish to not do that. So when you find something, you buy up and up. Like oftentimes if I'm going someplace to get something that I need, especially if I'm on the bike, let's say I have extra room, I'll buy a few canned items just because I can haul them home and tuck them away, and someday I may want them. And then you go through that stuff now and again, and eat what you think should be rotated, but 72 hours just ain't going to do it. But I think what this thing that they're talking about there is to get people, it's kind of a ploy to get people thinking in the war frame of mind because they're trying to suck as much money out of them people as they can to build up their military. So they got to get you thinking that way that, oh, you have to kick in money so they can buy more tanks and more missiles. But I hate to see that happen. But the EU is strange. I mean, they really want a war. That's the only way they can justify their existence. I mean, originally they were a trading organization, but now they want to be a military power, which is too bad. So at one time I was thinking, yeah, Ukraine, well, they could get into the EU, nobody would care. I guess now you have to care. You can't have Ukraine in the EU. Well, in the first place, they don't really want to trade with the EU. Ukraine or the EU doesn't want Ukraine. They're having trouble now, even with such stupidness like eggs. They're having trouble in the EU because a lot of eggs from Ukraine are coming in really cheap, undercutting the price of the regular producers in Europe. So they're putting a stop to that. I mean, I don't know why if Trump is looking for eggs, why chase all over hell? You can probably get them cheap in Ukraine if that's what you really want, instead of rare earth minerals. But it's the same with the grain out of Ukraine. But the idea of having Ukraine in with the EU to do this big military expansion, that's not good. In the EU, they keep talking that it'll be like between 5 and 10 years, war with Russia will be inevitable. War should not be inevitable. You shouldn't plan these things. Well, we tend to do that. I mean, we're behind schedule now, but we tend to schedule wars. But this Ukraine thing threw us behind schedule. But boy, that should be a last resort. But it's the only way those people in the EU can hang on to power is to get a war churned up and get money out of all their citizens because they're just You know, they're even talking now. They want to put a tax on your iPhone updates. Craziness. I would appreciate that. You know, I have trouble. I've got an Android phone, and they're constantly bugging you with updates. And usually, if you get an update, it's like there'll be like 5 updates waiting. And if you update them, one of them isn't going to work. One of them is going to screw up what was working. You know, so no, I'm not a big fan of updates. But they want to be able to tax you every time you update in the EU. They're a strange bunch, but boy, they're trying to milk their people for any money they can. You know, they are going to struggle there until they, you know, really got to get out of that EU. Oh well, but 72 hours and think, yep, you're in good shape now. That's just nonsense. Incredibly foolish. You know, like I say, I could get by cheap. I mean, I don't worry about it. I make a point of having stuff on hand, but not with the thought of, you know, nuclear war or the end of the world. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that can happen, even just in your life, where you could struggle. So, yeah, it's good to have stuff on hand. Even parts. I mean, like I keep parts on hand because I don't want to be struggling to get a part for something. But food, yeah, you got to keep food on hand. But 72 hours, it's really sickening. And I can see what they're doing. You know, they're just trying to get their people thinking, yeah, war is inevitable. Wars are never inevitable. Bad news. But it is the path to power. It's the only way they can stay in power. All these unelected EU officials, if people really look at what they're doing, they'll be out of power. So, got to get people thinking we need them. They need them because a war is coming. Nonsense. Oh, yeah, well, I was going to mention this. Somebody had noticed this Stanley coffee cup. Well, what I got this for actually is for on the road grader because I've got a regular Stanley thermos. You know, they got them little cups, and man, I spill more coffee than I drink. I'm not a big coffee drinker, but a lot of times I'll have tea along. I thought it's actually made for like on boats, and it's got a rubberized bottom. It seals up on top. You know, it's a very tight seal, and it does keep things warm, and it will not tip over. That was my whole theory, because I do spill a lot of coffee. Like I say, more than I drink. But I kind of like this. You know, and it matches my Stanley thermos. Because them Stanley thermos, they're like a little bigger than a shot glass and very tippy. This thing, I got just a spot where it won't tip. I guess that's all. But damn, I hate to see what the EU is doing to them people. I mean, they've really put them in a bind, and I don't know why they don't just revolt on them. That would be intolerable to me to be, you know, they're nickel and diming them to death. Uh, I don't know why they tolerate that. And you can't, like I say, they're not elected, these EU officials. You got very little choice in the elections. Either that Le Pen now, where they threw her in jail. You know, that's a hell of a thing. And that was a whole EU deal, you know. But if you don't like the people running, throw them in jail. It's a scoundrelly bunch. But yet, you see them all the time on the news. You know, they're yammering away, trying to get a war going. But a 72-hour war, we don't have to worry. Won't even notice it.